How's that, everybody? Sound. Little bit of sound there now. Gil, can you hear? Hello. All right. The beauty of live. Hello, Key. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the live. I will be working out some kinks here, as you can tell. Hook up this mic. So I'm excited about today's guest, Mark Taylor. Mark adds a very unique perspective on the experience of working on a hit show. And I've never talked to Mark in detail about what he had to do. Hello, Leo in Toronto. All right, let's plug that in. Let's see that. Now we have that. All right. Hopefully you can hear me okay now. We had a fun time last week. For those of you that joined, I was talking to Phil Rosenthal, and Phil dropped into his own house because I was crashing, and I was enjoying sitting in Frank and Marie's chairs, which of course I sat in occasionally during the series, but just when we had to sit down and somebody wasn't shooting in those. Love those glasses. Thank you, Leo. Thank you. Hello. How is the weather? How is everybody doing? Because it's been a rough year, obviously. And hopefully just these little Sunday visits have helped everybody. Let's see here. Yes, Phil's guest house. No, did I steal one of the chairs? No, Windlepoons, that's a very good idea. I did not steal one, and I'm hoping that maybe we can make something like that. So, hello, Mark is on. Great. Hello, Paula. Paula, you're in Canada. Bright and sunny. Karen in the UK. That's great. And Teresa in Chicago. Yes, you got a shout out last week. I don't know if you saw Phil's episode of Somebody Feed Phil where he is in Chicago, but it's really, really, it's really worth seeing. It's worth watching, even if you don't live in Chicago. All right, Mark, I'm going to send you a little request to Mark. There we go. All right. So much. Hello, Hawaii. Yes, Florida, spoiled. Oh, hello, Norway. What's the temperature in Norway today? And sunny Melbourne. Yes, thank you, Mary Carpo. Yes. And Teresa, yes, Tufano's in Chicago. All right. If I make it to Chicago, I will definitely make a point of getting to your family restaurant of over 90 years. That's very impressive. And Mark, if you are watching or listening, if you're on your iPhone and it's not showing up live, you have to use the app on your iPhone to be able to join. Okay. Hello, Texas. Yes. So let me explain some of the, hello, Ryan. How are you, Ryan? Good to see you, Ryan. Good to see you on here. Okay. So Mark, if you're unable to join, you might want to restart your iPhone or your smartphone, whatever it is. Or I'm going to send you another request again. Let's see this. And here we go. The beauty of live. Here we go. Yes. Okay, sending it to you, Mark. Hello, Jerry Wolf from Wisconsin. Thank you for everyone involved in making the show, best show ever. Yes, thank you. Hello, Sydney. Yes, first day of autumn there. That's right. You guys are the opposite. Yes. So, Mark, if you're watching now, you should see the where you see Patty Heaton's face. It should be saying live. You're on your iPhone or smartphone, and you see it saying live, and you just click on that, and it should say send request to be live. And so if that doesn't show up, you might want to restart your smartphone. Hello, Leo. Leo, some great questions, by the way. Thank you. So while we're waiting for Mark, I'm going to take you through, just so it makes sense, what his involvement was. When Ray, you might have to upgrade. You might have to upgrade your app, Mark. So Ray did stand up, and starting around '87, he did the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. And nothing happened. He did that in '92. Yes, I have asked Patty. Patty will be joining. I just got to figure out a Sunday that works for her and works for the schedule. So yes, Patty is excited to join. And I always enjoy talking to Patty. So Ray does stand-up, starts in '87, does the Johnny Carson show in 1992, I believe it was, or '91. It was the last 6 months of Carson. Nothing happens, meaning there's no development deal. Ray does a great job. I was there in the audience. He does a great job. He gets tons of laughs, but he doesn't get what's known as a development deal. And a development deal is what leads to, when someone gives you a development deal, they try and find a writer. And then the writer meets with the talent, who in this case was Ray. And in this case, the writer was Phil Rosenthal. So Ray does Johnny Carson, nothing happens. He does the David Letterman show in 1995, and he gets a development deal from that. And so from that development deal, they're looking for a producer partner. So David Letterman's company is called Worldwide Pants, a very funny sounding name, Worldwide Pants. The development deals for low money, because I know we're talking about, okay, Mark, let me just see. Let's see, Mark, if you can join, if you see me doing live, if you've updated your, let's see, Mr. Mark, let me just send you a request, send request. So the development deals were, some of them were a lot of money, for literally millions of dollars, and some of the development deals were for low money. Ray was a very, very low amount of money. The idea was, let's develop a sitcom. Now, you need a producing partner, and on Letterman at the time, one of Letterman's people knew somebody at HBO. HBO, you might recognize the name Stu Smiley. Okay, hold on. So Mark, you're being told repeatedly the invitation has expired. Have you updated your app maybe? I'm going to send you another request, but do you see, Mark, the live? Does it show that I'm live? Do you see around Patty Heaton's face in the upper left-hand corner that I'm live? It'll, and then you hit that. So Mr. You must upgrade your app. So Mark, go to the App Store, shop around while you're in there. Maybe there's some other apps, but when you get around to it, download and upgrade your app for Instagram, and then you'll be able to join. It should take very few moments. So yeah, I'm getting a message. Thank you, Karen. I'm getting a message, Mark, that says you need to upgrade your app, and I believe it. Okay, so now one of the people that worked at Letterman was friends with somebody that worked at HBO. And HBO at that time had something called HBO Independent Productions. And HBO Independent Productions was trying to develop shows. So the show that came out was Everybody Loves Raymond, and Everybody Loves Raymond was produced by HBO Independent Productions. You'll see that at the end. Worldwide Pants, and you see that dish of food. That's Phil's company. That po oh yes, okay, let's see now. Okay. Great. Um, let's see if Mark. Hello, Mark. Let me.
Hi, Tom.
Wow, I got to turn this volume down. You're good to see you, Mark.
Good to see you. I'm glad I was finally able to join the chat.
Yeah, I'm curious how old your version of Instagram was. Was it from the 1980s or?
It was from February 22nd, 2021. Thank you very
Oh,
much.
I take back my insult then.
Although I
Mark,
have to say, I deserve your insult because it shouldn't have been so difficult to log in, but yet it was.
well, it's fine. The record is 30 minutes for Larry, the craft service from craft services, you know. So, and I ended up having to get on the phone with him, and I even went over it with him the day before. But be that as you know, I was able to tell a little bit of the backstory because
By the
here's
way,
what.
I'm offended that Larry was invited to the show before I was. Although, let's be clear, craft service is the beating heart of every show, so I'm not surprised.
Yeah, yeah, and it's not in order. As Jason Gellis 2 weeks ago, he goes, "Boy, you must really be dipping the bottom." I said, there is no pecking order because, in all seriousness, Mark, the goal here is tell the whole story of how a show is made,
Of
and so
course.
everybody has this missing element. And I was thinking, I never really talk. I only talked to you about everything under the sun, but I don't think I ever talked to you about what your responsibilities were. And I think it's such a unique perspective because obviously I know what the writers went through intimately, but it wasn't until after the show that I realized by talking to people, and as you know, I'm very friendly and I talk to a lot of people, but the people on stage, here's what construction did, here's what, in depth, I mean. And so for you, I want to go back, Mark, because I posted some pictures and it seems like you have the best job in the world because you come down, you're watching, there's a table read photo I put of you, and you
I
can see,
saw it.
yeah, you see the right side of your head. Any, anybody in the public who loves Everett Raymond, if they could snap their fingers and be able to be transported to a table read of Everett Raymond and have that front row seat, it's an envious position. So
Indeed.
let's just go back big picture, Mark. I was telling them that Everybody Raymond came out of a development deal that Ray got with Letterman's company. Letterman's company hooked up with HBO Independent Productions.
I actually
And
heard all of that. So yes, I heard everything you were telling
yeah,
the
but
audience.
right. So for the audience too, just to wrap it up, then Phil's production company is called Where's Lunch, and then later on, in a muddy way that I'm not clear on, CBS started getting involved in picking up the tab for certain amounts. And and we don't have to get boring with details, but behind the scenes, there's so much machinations that I don't know, that the public doesn't know, that are this actor's contract is up. They're going to negotiate for crazy money. For example, Mom just ended. I'm friends with Allison Janney, and I know that her contract was up. A lot of the contract was up. There's a lot of big fighting, for money, not with the actors, but with the production companies. So from the outside, you go, oh, I guess their ratings were low. But that could be 1/10 of the reason that the show doesn't get picked up.
Yeah, well, look, in the case of Everybody Loves Raymond, the ratings were not low. The ratings were quite good. And when you say I had a very enviable job, that show was incredibly well run, from Phil and Ray down to Lisa and Ken, who are the line producer and production manager. So my job was quite easy on that show because the people on that show were not only good at their jobs, but diligent about doing their jobs really well. But there were always back and forths between the production companies and the studio, which is what HIP was, which is where I worked, and the network, which was CBS. So there were always back and forths between who's going to pay for this, who's going to pay for that. And HBO at the time was a very flush company. There were a lot of very big ticket projects that were making a lot of money for the company. So HBO was always willing to pick up its share of the tab without much argument, without much discussion. CBS was run very differently, and it was a company that was very much about towing the line on things and did not support talent in the way that HBO did. So there were a lot of back and forths between our two companies about who would bear that responsibility. And so I was very fortunate in that I worked for a company that was willing to step up to the plate. And I really felt for my partners at CBS because it made their jobs more difficult to be partnered with a company that was willing to spend much more freely than they were, but they were great people. And so it always got worked out.
Yeah. So then let's go just for big picture, Mark, because you and we're instantly inside baseball right away as we're talking. So in the just the production week, just to get that clear, the production week started with a table read. So at the table read were people from CBS, people from HBO. That's Mark Taylor, who I'm talking to. Mark would come down to the table read. So I'm just going from my perspective so people kind of understand what we're talking about. You have the table read. At the end of the table read, there's a notes session. Now, I have a different perspective on notes because I always liked the people that were assigned to our show. And in the time after Everybody Loves Raymond, I went to, a friend of mine did a show called Rules of Engagement. And he's like, hey, we're doing an adaptation in Poland. Do you think you can do it? Because we're in production. There's nobody on the show who can do it because we're on the show. And I said, sure. So I went to a couple table reads. The notes that were given by the network. So I'm a neutral person now. I have no I didn't write the script. I'm not giving the network executive the stink eye going, why aren't you laughing at that? It's funny. Every note that the network, and it happened to be Alex, you know Alex Jaffe, who was there. Every note that this network executive gave after the table read, I agreed with 100%. And just so the audience, everybody who's watching, there's a little bit of friction built in because you're creative. And now here comes Mark Taylor who goes, let me tell you something about what Marie should do. Now that's the feeling potential. That's not what happened. But what you did, the positive thing, Mark, was, and then I want you to tell your perspective. The positive thing was we're so close to it. We've lived with this script for 2 months. We're watching the table. We're filling in all the gaps. So now here comes Mark, who, you know, happens to be an astute observer. If something's missing, if something's unclear, we have to trust he's right because in some ways he represents this audience. And so if Mark says it and 2 other people there say it, then we have to go back because we have a writing problem that we have to address. So tell me, Mark, how would you go about you have a table read coming up. You get a script beforehand or you try and do it neutral?
You get the script beforehand, and like you, it helps to read the script so that you're not learning everything in the table read. You're actually hearing it on its feet for the first time. You know, you're hearing the actors perform it for the first time, but you're clear on what the overall sort of direction of the script is. So you're hearing it for the first time, and you're really just looking for places that aren't clear, where there's either a lack of continuity or something isn't tracking, an idea isn't tracking from beginning to end, or a joke is just either so inside baseball or just not landing, or it's offensive in a way that, you know, the group of people who are a part of putting it together might not hear, but as an outside objective perspective. And I think the way in which to do that responsibly is that everything's an opinion. Everyone in Hollywood, it's not like being a doctor where there's a definitive, this is the way you do this is the way you do not do this. It's an opinion on what you think works, what you think is funny, what you think is smart. And so I would always just give my opinion with the understanding that it was just that. This is my take on this, and you can do with it what you want. You know, whether you agree, whether you disagree, if you feel it helps you, you're welcome to take this and use it however you see fit, not even the way in which it's being offered to you. I would never prescribe something, and just leave it to people to determine how that information would benefit them.
Yeah, which is great. And obviously, you know, I see you at Phil's house. So a lot of times the showrunner and the network, which, you know, or the production company, they don't necessarily get along. And in the worst case scenario, they ban people from the set and it becomes a terrible confrontational thing. So just again, for the people watching, look at it in a simpler terms. HBO is spending a lot of money. They need somebody from their company to go, please make sure everything is going okay on this thing that we're spending a lot of money on. So that's like the simplest way to put it.
Yeah, I think those circumstances that don't go well, I think it's a combination of things. Either it's a show that really is not working, and the person who's coming in and giving feedback is not respectful of the fact that these people aren't intending for it not to work. Everyone wants it to work. And so how you offer that feedback is just as important as the feedback you offer. Or it's that the person who's offering the feedback is not respectful of the fact that these people are putting a lot of time and effort and care into something. And even when it's not working, there's a way in which to be deferential and respectful in how you deliver that information. And some people think because their network is paying all this money that they have the right to say and do whatever they want. And that's off-putting. I would never be that presumptuous. I would never have that little respect for the time and effort that people are putting into a show. I love working with writers. I have such respect for the work that writers do. I'm not a writer, so I want to help them do better with what they're doing if there's an opportunity to help it. But I also respect that I may not always understand the overall intent of what they're doing, and what they're doing might work perfectly well regardless of my feeling. And so again, I offer that input. They can take it or leave it, and that becomes their responsibility. I think that was one of the beauties of HBO, was the feeling was it's always the creator's show. And even if the show doesn't work, we never wanted to be in the position where we're pushing them in a direction to do something where it was then no longer their choice for whether or not they were doing. A show would live or die by the choices made by the people who ran the show. We would support them in the choices they made. We would offer opinions to help them improve the choices they were make, but we were never making those choices. And so I think that helps a lot with creating a respectful relationship, so that there is no feeling that you're stepping in places where you're not welcome.
Yeah, and I think just historically, for those that, because it's hard, because we're talking now to Australia and Norway and the UK.
By the way, their shows work the exact same way as they do here in the United States. Having shot in France, having shot in Australia, the process is the same everywhere.
Yes. And I was going to bring up the historical perspective of HBO started as a thing that ran movies and did comedy specials
and boxing.
Yes, and boxing. So the thought of HBO winning an Emmy was kind of comical when it started. The thought of them making a show and dominating TV was so absurd that it was incomprehensible. And then
so absurd, in fact, that they started the Cable Ace Awards because they wouldn't get nominated for Emmys. So they started their own awards show with other cable companies.
Yeah, which, by the way, here's trivia that perhaps nobody knows this. Phil knows it. Ray knows it. The original moment of Ray's real brother going, "Everybody loves Raymond." I do. In the pilot, it's like, Ray, whatever, writes up people do the wave for him. I get shot at work. Okay, so in real life, Ray's brother, the policeman, is like, everybody, like, it never ends for Raymond, right? Everybody loves Raymond. He's commenting because he's picked up Ray's Cable Ace Award. That's so.
Are you serious?
Yes, because
That's
he won
amazing.
for Jonathan. Dr. Katz. For Jonathan Katz. So Ray won a Cable Ace Award, and his brother was jealous. That indirectly led to the title of Everybody Loves Raymond. So
that's fantastic.
Yeah. So I'm just getting back to the big picture again of HBO. Incomprehensible that they would succeed or let alone win Emmys. Then their leadership bet on the creative people, and you got The Sopranos, Sex and the City, miniseries.
6 Feet Under, the list goes on.
Yeah, the list goes on. And all of a sudden, the network, the powerhouse in 1970s, 80s, 90s, all of a sudden at the Emmy Awards, all you would hear is, for the HBO miniseries, for the HBO, the amount of Emmys that HBO, because they bet so much on creative types. So what Mark was talking about originally and saying, we were coming from this philosophy, and CBS the network was a slightly different philosophy, even though the people both were like, we believe in these writers, we believe in this talent. But HBO is coming from a place going, look, we've bet on the writers, we've bet on the talent, and now we have a bucket of Emmys every year. So, Band of Brothers, etc. So now, Mark, now I want to go back even more, because people are like, how did Mark Taylor get to where he is? Like, how do you end up going, I'm going to go cover a hit show? And we're talking about a hit show because when there's trouble, which I've been on shows where the network stops showing up, and that's when you go, uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
when the network stops caring, you go, this is not a good, like, if we ever at Raymond said, it's weird Mark Taylor hasn't been here in 4 weeks, we'd go, that's not a good sign. That
4
means,
weeks. If your network executive hasn't been there in 2 weeks, you better expect that Larry, the craft service guy, is going to be packing up that table any day now.
So just let's go, and Mark, just because I'm interested also, we don't have to hear your whole story, but if I say this to you, hail Colby, hail.
I hope you're singing it to the tune of "Oh Canada."
One of my closest childhood friends went to Colby College, where you went. So just because people are fascinated, let's hear how do you wind up sitting in front of the cast of Everybody Loves Raymond going, let me think of my notes for them.
It's actually quite simple. I mean, I came up in production. I started out as a PA. I always knew I wanted to be a producer. And so I worked every job I could in production, from PA to coordinator to location manager to accountant. I did every possible job I could in production except for hair and makeup, because I wanted to understand how all the pieces worked and how everything fit together. And I thought, as a producer, it would behoove me to understand how all those different departments not only did their jobs, but how they worked together to create a show. So that was my goal. I then started producing. And while I was going through those steps, a lot of the projects I worked on were for HBO in New York at the time, in the 80s. And a number of the executives liked working with me, thought I did good job. And, you know, over time, finally said, hey, would you be interested in coming into HBO and being a production executive? I had just started producing, and I wasn't sure at first that I wanted to do so because I was so excited to finally achieve that goal that I had set for myself. But they were really smart and great people and said, look, the truth of the matter is, you're going to get, if you want to build your career as a producer, you're not going to get to meet as many talented and successful people anywhere else as you will here working at HBO. So we both agreed, let's try it for 3 months. Let's see how it goes. And I ended up being there for 6 years.
Wow. That's all. And just for people, PA is production assistant.
It's the entry-level job in the film and television industry. Right.
And we had Jason Gellis was on 2 weeks ago, and Jason went from PA to ultimately head writer of Ellen and a room full of Emmys. So it's the one thing for people who want to break into the business. I think what's key is what Mark said, which is he did. You do everything, and people are just, all they want is someone they can rely on at any level. And they go, what about this person? And the people who are smart will push that person forward, knowing, oh, okay, I can trust him. He gets along with people, and let's send him in. So they would never, getting now to specifically to HBO, if HBO was like, oh man, this person always angers people, his interactions are terrible, they're not sending that guy to Everybody Loves Raymond. They're just not.
Well, they're not going to send you anywhere. Truthfully, our jobs are as much about doing the job, whether that's budgeting or scheduling or casting or writing. It's all of that. And a big component for everyone in this industry is talent relations, be it an actor that you're relating to or a writer or a production assistant. It's the relationships, being able to comfortably interact with other people and successfully achieve your goals and do your job because it's a collaborative environment. So if you can do that with other people and with other people liking and enjoying working with you, you're going to go far. You have to also be good at your job, but that's a component that a lot of people either don't recognize in terms of how important it is, or they're not capable of interacting with people comfortably and successfully and happily, and that doesn't help them. It works against them. Not to say that there aren't plenty of people who are terrible to work with who've become quite successful, but they're the exception to the rule.
Well, especially over time, because if you see clickbait on, clickbait is, let me click on this that has come across my desktop. A lot of times they'll say, why is this person never going to work again? And obviously they just want you to click on it, but it's often very much, and you and I know, there are certain actors and actresses where you go, you'll hear the people, the network go, before you know it, before you know that they're not good to work with, you'll be like, what about this person? And someone will be like, no, I don't care if they're the best actor or actress. Never, I will never work with that person.
I will tell you, as someone who works at a studio and has worked at networks, that is the same conversation that gets had about writers. It's the same conversation about directors, about producers, about lighting directors, about cinematographers. Everyone gets evaluated by that stick, everyone. And it is a big part of how you get to continue your career or not, especially now with Me Too and, you know, all of the racial conversations happening. If you're someone who is disrespectful of other people, good luck to you. This is a time in which a lot of those people are being brushed aside.
Yeah, and I think along that point, 10, 20 years ago, information didn't travel like it does now. And, you know, the pendulum, I feel like sometimes has swung too far. But
Oh, by the way, that information traveled. All of those studios and networks were headed by straight white men, and that information just traveled amongst them, and they were the ones who made the decisions, and they kept it amongst themselves. But that information traveled amongst everyone else in the industry too. There was just less power to do anything about it. And now there's a much more egalitarian atmosphere where there's a lot more ability to do something about that.
yeah, to me, absolutely. And I think the advent of well, look, I'm talking to you and I'm talking to people around the world, and I didn't have to get approval and I didn't have to do a pre-interview with you and go, make sure Mark doesn't bring this up, make sure to do this, we're going to cover this. So that freedom of getting information out applies across the board. And so the ivory tower that Mark is talking about that was so powerful and, you know, could kill someone's career, make some career, that slowly is crumbling. So,
Yeah.
And I want to, just getting back, I always think on a smaller basis, when you start up a business, you just don't want somebody that you're constantly arguing with. And that's why we're talking about, you're saying it happens on every level. Lighting director, actor, actress, director. If you know that I'm going to have 5 fights to give my one note with this person, that person, you just go next.
And let's be clear, there's a difference between someone who's super good at what they do and they're passionate about it and they're fighting for the things they believe in, and someone who's just difficult and someone who fights for the sake of fighting or who's fighting the wrong arguments. Those are all problems.
Yeah. And I think for just because we're relating to Everybody Loves Raymond, in our writer's room, we welcomed a big discussion about it, a big discussion about anything where you're really disagreeing. And Phil, because he was so confident in his ability, would hear both sides of the argument. And he would sit there and go, well, what do you think? Why would Marie do that? You know, and not Marie's doing it and I don't want to hear anybody else. And so that type of creative argument where you go, okay, I can have a huge disagreement with Mark and he's going to talk about these notes at the table read. And we're going to sit there and go, okay, what is he getting? What are we missing that he's getting? You want that as opposed to, I don't want to hear any notes.
Yeah.
And so that, yeah. So it's not that there's no argument. It's just that you don't like, oh, now the person's just dug in on this point. And
I have to say, Phil and Ray are two of the most gracious showrunners I've ever worked with, because they were so comfortable in knowing what they wanted the show to be that they never shut down anyone bringing another opinion to the table. They could always graciously hear it. They didn't always use it because it didn't always serve the goals that they were achieving, but they were so good about just hearing people, and that's not so common. And that, I think, is really the sign of someone who is really good at what they do and a good person too.
Yeah, a really good person, cares about other people, and just super, you know, I think that confidence of Phil and Ray, I don't think it was the same, you know, the middle of season 1 as it was season 7, you know,
That's
where
understandable. Yeah.
It's in the normal scheme of things. And I think if you don't feel threatened, in other words, if Mark comes up with a brilliant idea, and that's how Phil was, is like a good idea can come from anywhere. So if Mark comes up with a brilliant idea for a script or a fix and goes, would it be better if this, when that show airs, we all look better. Nobody can reach out of the script, out of the, you know, TV and go, you know, Mark Taylor actually gave that note, but he's not getting, we all look better, you know?
It does, and no one should be giving a note for their own benefit. That's not the point. It's a collaborative environment. You should believe in the show and everyone connected to it. And if you have a good idea, everyone should benefit from that idea, that good idea.
Yeah. Now I'm going to go. Sorry, Mark. The beauty of this is live questions. So I'm going to go back. Yeah. And Wendell Poons, that's not his real name, but he's in London. He was asking, when you read the script, was it easy to visualize did you hear it instantly in Frank and Marie's voice?
Yes. Because those characters were so well defined and the actors were so incredibly good and so well versed at playing those roles that when you read the script, you always read it in their voices. And that was actually part of when you knew something was off, when suddenly you'd be like, wait, would Marie ever do that? In fact, very specifically, I was not a creative executive on Everybody Loves Raymond. I was a physical production executive. So I was not there to comment on the scripts. I was there to help with the budgeting and the scheduling of the show. I've since become a creative executive, and that is what I do now. But at that time, that is not what I did. But there was one script in which I can't remember if it was Marie or Frank's surprise party, and Marie was inviting everyone to a party. I think it was for Frank, and all of the extras were white. And I said to Phil, I don't think this is what Marie would do. And just in this episode, she's talking about this Latin family and this and that. And I said, she would have a wider variety of people at this party because that's Marie. She's experimenting. She's looking for things. She's embracing new things, whereas Frank is more rigid. And Phil said, you know what? You're absolutely right. And so they changed that. And I was not there to give creative notes on the script. And I never did. I would always give my creative notes to the creative executives from HIP if I had anything to say and let them filter it. But they weren't there this week, so I offered that. And Phil did not turn to me and say, you're not a creative executive. Shut up. Get out of my face. He said, you know what? That's actually, I hadn't thought about that. And that, I think, is to his credit in that if you had something to offer that was for the betterment of the show, they were on board with hearing it.
Yeah, because it made everybody it made you look good, no matter where it came from. And just I want to go back and talk about an experience that nobody knows about that happens on a show, which is everybody who's watching this enough. And again, this is Tom Caltabiano. I was a writer on the show for all 9 years, and I'm talking to Mark Taylor, who worked for HBO Independent Productions. What was your official title? Director of production, or what was it?
Yeah, I think it was director of production.
Okay. Before the table read, which was the only time you would see the script read from beginning to end in its entirety, and the reason I said you're lucky to watch it, because we all were, you never saw it again other than when it aired. So when it aired, but you're also, when you're watching the table read, you're hearing the laughs real time, and you're seeing, and sometimes, Brad Garrett would just he would just be like, oh my God, is this funny? He would just start laughing and look over at the writers and Patty too. And to see the cast laughing and to see that come alive was priceless. But before the table read, we would have another table read. And
we would frequently wait for you to finish that table read so we could have the network table read.
Right. And there was a production table read that happened where for all the departments, they would go through, and I think it was Randy Soar, the first AD. Would read through the script. So for those of you watching right now, you imagine a script that you're about to read in a half hour, and it's hysterical and wall-to-wall laughs, and it's the funniest thing you've ever seen. Before that event, the first assistant director reads, and he's looking for, what does the props department need? What does the set dressing need? What extras do we need? So he just reads through it, and he goes, okay, let's see, page 1. Frank and Marie are talking. They're talking. Ray comes in. He has an umbrella. Talking. And now, okay, Ray leaves, and there's another. We need 2 people here. There's talking. Frank, they're still talking. And you watch this, and you go, this is the worst script. This is the worst show ever made, because there's nothing about the funny and all about the details. And it's a necessary time, because when you wrote the script, you would go ahead.
I was just going to say, it was my job to be there for that first table read because I was a production executive. So I was there to make sure that they were taking account of all the props that were needed, the wardrobe changes, all of the technical elements. I would then stay for the read with the actors reading it, which I was not obligated to stay for, because the scripts were so good, because it was aside from the camaraderie that comes out of that and getting to spend time with everyone, because that doesn't happen throughout the rest of the week, they were also really good scripts. And it was a fun part of my day to then see the actors perform the script in its whole, because as you said, you weren't going to see it again until it was on air, but also you felt like you were a part of something special because they were really good.
Yeah, exactly. So now here's a question. Did CBS have a great deal of input or interfere? So I'll answer from my perspective, Mark. You can answer for yours. So just so people know, CBS was one of the big three networks, and they had tremendous amount of power, and they put the show on the air. So ultimately, everyone is beholden to CBS. So
even HBO, yeah.
Yes. So if CBS says show's over, Mark and everybody at HBO can go, what? It's over. It's a great show. You know how hard it is? They go, sorry, bye. It doesn't have good ratings. You're done. So there is, on the scale of things, the network is king. The network has all the shots. Now, having said that, there's a hit show. They want to have a working relationship. So do they have any input? They have somebody who's covering the show. It's called the current executive. So CBS, just like Mark shows up at the table read, CBS has a person that shows up at the table read, and they give notes also. And because it was such a good relationship that Mark was describing, there was never Mark is giving the stink eye to the CBS executive and going, I know you have a lot of power, but watch that didn't happen.
No. It was a very, very comfortable symbiotic relationship. In fact, those executives had the most responsibility, because the head of CBS at the time was a much more demanding boss than the head of HBO. As I said, the head of our network/studio was very much about trust the creators, let them do their work, and support them in doing their work. It was a very different ethos at CBS, where it was very much, we know what we want on our air. I think the executives that we had on our show were very smart and very talented and very comfortable letting you guys be the people in charge of your show, to their credit. But that's not how their company operated. I mean, when we took the show to Italy, their executives were much more intrusive and wanted to work a certain way, whereas the head of our company was like, look, we're giving you this much money to take the show there. Go do it. Figure out how you want it to work and just do it. Whereas CBS was very much about, no, you have to stay in this hotel, you have to do this thing. And that's not necessarily helpful or supportive, but you have to find that balance. Yeah.
Well, it comes down to trusting people, and CBS is such a big corporation that somebody's head, we should look at the flip side in just finishing this point. There are shows that are a disaster, and you're trying to watch costs. And Everybody Loves Raymond is an example of, this is a smooth running show. There's nobody that's going to go on the show, hey, we're going to spend a crazy amount. Like, everybody knew what the parameters were. So if CBS didn't do anything, it probably would have ran just as well.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah. And so, and you know this, Mark, I'm sure, when you're on a sinking ship or show with bad ratings, that's when it becomes tough, because now you're going, how much do we spend? How much do we trust these showrunners? I think if we replace this actor, it might have, it's everybody searching for an answer, because what Mark said at the beginning is everyone wants to make a hit show. No one goes, let's make a really mediocre show that gets canceled right away. Everybody's like, this will be great. And so I think it's and I think that was my eye-opening thing, is there's so much at stake. There's so much.
Especially as you're saying, when a show starts going poorly, fear becomes a part of the equation that's not there otherwise. There is no fear at Raymond. Everyone was so free and comfortable to do their jobs and so confident in how they did them because they were doing a good job, and that was recognized by the people they were doing them for. But I think in a show that finds itself in trouble and isn't doing well with the audiences, regardless of why, there's suddenly a lot of fear that they're going to lose their job, and am I going to work again, and am I at fault for this not working? And people make bad decisions when they're operating under a cloud of fear.
Yeah, absolutely. And just, sorry, I'm reading back through some of his questions. Just to make it clear, CBS was the network. CBS has a department called development. So the development department is where Ray went initially to try and develop the show. Once the show is on the air, they have something called a current department. So CBS would send somebody from their current department down to the show to cover the show. So I'm just going back to somebody asking
Yeah.
the development, and some of the players, Wendy Trilling, at the time, she championed the show. She put it in front of the CEO of the company and said, hey, we should really do this show. So she was a big champion of the show, and she would come down. She came to the finale, and I do have somebody wrote a question, were any of the table reads filmed? And so I filmed a couple. So somewhere in my archives, I have a couple of table reads filmed. I think maybe Young Girl or some of the episodes I wrote. I think I filmed one or two. But at the beginning, Mark, the first year, the episodes were satellite fed to David Letterman's office, to Worldwide Pants, to
New
Jim
York,
Peterson.
yeah.
And I asked Jim Peterson, who worked for Worldwide Pants, I'm like, Jim, do you think those tapes exist? Because that would be so priceless to be able to see those. I mean, imagine seeing.
You can't do that anymore, by the way. Like, we've had shows where, because of COVID, people have said, oh, can we tape the table read? And can people watch the table read remotely? And actors will not go for it because they don't want to be, because they understand now that something that gets recorded could be disseminated and shared without their permission. They're not in makeup. They're not really doing the performance in full sort of, mode. And so they don't want to be seen as doing it half-assed or seen without their makeup or whatever the case may be. So it's a hard thing to tape them now because everyone's become very savvy about the fact that it can be used against them. And also it could end up traveling the globe without their permission.
Yeah, it's funny because I only look, it's different with a show that's ended because they're not going to go, I think we should recast Patty Heaton. I'm watching the third episode. I don't think she works. And so that danger is gone for the actors.
Yeah.
So now it would just be like, I would love
to. She is forever Deborah. She embodied that role in a way where no one can change that.
Yes. But that's maybe those tapes exist, but I definitely have a couple of table reads that I will share for these friends. So, and Mark, do you have any, is there an episode or two that that stick out to you that you love?
Oh gosh, yeah. There are a bunch of episodes. I mean, I genuinely love the show. In fact, when I was first told I was going to be working on the show, I was not very happy because I was working at HBO and there was all this sexy programming going on. And I was like, isn't that the old show with white people on CBS? Like, I work at HBO and you're going to put me on a broadcast show? But I have to say, it is one of the highlights of my career was working on that show. I met the most wonderful people, and the show is consistently funny and smart from start to finish. But some of my favorites are The Suitcase, where they come back from a trip and it gets left on the staircase for a week or two. That's like a story out of my own life. I love that episode. I love the episodes in Italy because it was such a great bonding experience for everyone on the show that was fortunate enough to travel there for it.
By the way, Mark, I'm going to stop you because you might not know this, but indirectly, HBO's generosity led to the Baggage episode, which was such a giant hit.
I do know. I know that. I do know that story. Yes.
So for the audience, HBO treated the writers and some of the producers to a day in San Francisco of a beautiful dinner in the afternoon and then a concert of the Rolling Stones at night. And
I was there.
Yeah. So Tucker Cawley and his wife, they brought that suitcase, and that's what led to that episode. So, by the way, if it was a master plan of HBO going, we need better stories.
That's part of what I love about, that is one of those things where I was part of that day where we all went up to San Francisco, and then that story coming out of it, we joked about it at HBO. We were like, we practically invented that episode. I mean, it was such a good episode, and it did come out of a real experience that happened to one of the writers and his wife.
Yeah.
And those are the episodes that I really love the most, is where I knew that behind the scenes it was something that happened between Phil and Monica, or Ray and Anna, or one of the writers and their wives or partners. And I just thought, that's such a gift that someone has the ability to have an experience in their life that was funny or sad or whatever it may have been, and to translate it into something that audiences can relate to and laugh about and share in. That's a real special moment.
And I think that's, of course, it's such a realistic show. You know, you can't necessarily do that on Arrested Development or 30 Rock so much.
I should hope not.
Yeah. But I think that also speaks well. You know, Phil was always thinking of the Dick Van Dyke Show, where Carl Reiner said, you know, listen, people, lead your life and let's write about your life. And so Phil had the same philosophy. So you would come in with these stories. And, you know, when Phil wrote the Toaster episode, when that actual event happened with the toaster, he was actually upset. And a lot of us, you know, in hindsight, it feels like we went in and go, okay, I had a fight and it led to, a lot of times you go in and you go, oh, I had this terrible, you're not thinking of a story. And every once in a while, Phil will be like, put it on the board. That's a story. And so really, and the same thing happened to Phil with the toaster, where I think it was Steve Scrovan or one of the other writers said, Phil, this is a story. And Phil was angry. He was like, how is this a story? How is this a story? So, Mark, here's a question which I don't know that you can answer, but the approximate cost of producing ELR. Now, your $6 million a week salary, right? Exclude that. But you don't.
You're a funny man, Tom. That's actually a tougher question than it should be, only because it's so long ago now. And
right.
I've worked on so many different shows. I'm trying to like remember back that far. I mean, it really is a long time ago. I believe the cost of an episode was, well, it also depends on the time in the span of the show that you're asking about, because it ended at a much higher cost than it started at, because the actors made so much more money over time, deservedly so. But the cost of the actual show, what we call the below the line, which is the nuts and bolts of the show, that didn't change very drastically in the life of the show. But the cost of the actors and what the writers were able to write for the show, like Going to Italy, changed over time too, because of the success of the show. But I would guess it probably went from around $2 to $2.5 million an episode up to $6 or $7 million an episode by the end of its span, I'm guessing.
Yeah, and I think that's, and don't worry, this is not a court of law. This is an Instagram live. But
in this day and age, in the digital age, everything can be used in a court of law.
Mark Taylor, please announce to the court.
I'm being deposed.
Yeah, why would you possibly think it's $2.5 million? But I think that number sounds right. So just for people watching, when you do a pilot, I don't think you can do a pilot for less than $1 million. Like the cheapest pilot, right? I'm talking about for a sitcom where it's not, forget travel, forget driving, forget anything.
And this is for half-hour shows. Yes, a half-hour show. Yes.
Yeah. So you're on a stage, it's one set, etc. So you will not make a pilot for less than $1 million. So
in truth, today, you're not going to make a pilot for less than $2 million.
Okay,
maybe more.
Yeah. So great. So just so people know, $2 million. So just think now, it's more than that on Everybody Loves Raymond. So we're talking 15, 20 years ago. That's why, going back to our very original thing, Mark and the other HBO executives go, okay, we're spending $2 and $3 million a week. Can we assign somebody to make sure they know what they're doing? So it comes down to that. If you, as a person, go, I'm going to roll $2 million on this week, of course you want people going, please, let's keep an eye on them. Let's keep an eye on them.
It's even more structured than that. These are all publicly traded corporations. So there are stockholders. There are people who, if you have a show that suddenly is not spending money responsibly and is in the hole for $3, $4, $10, $20 million, and you just go, oh, no one was paying attention, heads are going to roll, deservedly so, because you should be paying attention to how you're investing your money. So it really is the responsibility of the network and the studio to make sure that things are being done responsibly.
Yeah, that's a great point, because it gets lost in the, when you're making, and when you're making a show, there's so much more at stake. And that's why when you're watching from the outside and you're on your couch and you're going, I wonder why that show got canceled. Or that seems like this show, you never know the other business factors that come into play. And just like the actors, the casting on Raymond, we got lucky in that they're amazing actors. But it could have been that we wanted Patty Heaton and she signed to first position on another pilot that got picked up and canceled after 3 months. and we now have this terrible or mediocre actress as Ray's wife. It didn't work out, but it didn't, thank God she got the part, but you never know what other factors are in play. And that was a real eye-opener when I started, knowing that, these agents are trying to get this person, and the CEO of CBS had a real trouble with that actress. So she goes, all these chess moves that are behind the scenes, when you think, well, it should be just pure creativity, et cetera. So Mark, just because we're going to have to, I knew we'd run out of time, but just to wrap it up, first of all, you're going to be asked by my producers, who are me, that to come back again another time. And so would you say, so I'm just reading through some of these questions, would you see a change in tone of being able to roll the dice on pilots now, just an informal observation from 20 years ago, or?
I think it's much harder now. I think every company has become so corporatized, it's much harder to take a risk on things, whereas previously some of these studios and networks were family owned. And so someone would just say, look, I like this person. I'm going to do a show about this because I like them and I trust them and I've worked with them before. You can't really do that so much anymore. Everything has to be accounted for. Everything gets tested. Is this what the demographic wants? Is this what people are watching? Everything is so much more quantifiable now. There are all these metrics that are used to judge everything. So it's harder to just roll the dice on something. But I think in any creative endeavor, some element of gut feeling should be influencing what you're doing. And there should always be room to roll the dice and take a chance. And to be able to, if you make that choice responsibly, to have it not work out and have that be okay, because you just don't know what's going to work and what's not going to work, no matter how many metrics you're trying to use to measure that.
Yeah. And I think, Mark, just along those lines, the thing that didn't exist when Everybody Loves Raymond was on the air was YouTube had just started. Instagram didn't exist. Facebook didn't exist. But, I see people on Facebook who, I don't know what they do, but they have 5 million followers. And when you're on a network TV show now, you're not even getting that view. So it's a complete paradigm shift that we can get into the next time you.
Yeah, I don't understand who these influencers are and what they do to warrant that many people saying I'm going to pay attention to them. But maybe one day I will understand it. But to this point, I do not. Yes,
the simplest way to look at it is whoever gets the attention is where the money flows.
Yes.
So forget the logic, and without trying to sound like we are old, the attention that we think of, in other words, you sit there and go, okay, that week of Everybody Loves Raymond was so much hard work, and they did this, and it pulled off, and all this came into line, and now this is a great episode, and hopefully we can get people to watch. That is a very specific piece of entertainment. But people on Instagram, for example, who are modeling bathing suits, that has 5 million followers. Okay, it's still somebody sees worth in that, even though for you and I, maybe on the outside, you go, well, it seems so easy to model bathing suits and get 5 million.
Truthfully, I don't think a lot of these people that have these huge followers are actually monetizing that. I mean, from what I can tell from my little time online is that these people are either doing something pornographic or that's purely based on how good looking they are. I don't know that they're actually doing anything that warrants them being seen as talented. So I have a lot of trouble understanding how that works.
So that, Mark, is a phenomenal discussion, which we will have next time, because that's what I'm trying to say. The people, I'm agreeing with you 100%. From the outside, you go, okay, so what do? I take pictures of myself and I'm very pretty.
Yeah.
Okay, and what do you do though exactly? So and it can be legit. I mean, I'm not saying pornographic stuff. I'm just saying they're very pretty. They pose, and somebody wants to sell bathing suits, so they send it to this person, and somebody is paying attention. So if I make a bathing suit, I want that person with 5 million followers to be seen in that bathing suit. So that's where the economics come in, but not the talent. The talent part, you're right. So it's more a reward of the system for gaining eyeballs. You know, it's very, well,
it's shallow. it's shallow, and unfortunately it is the way things seem to operate right now. But I wish someone would dig in and give us a little more understanding of what having that many followers actually meant, because sometimes I think that some of those followers are bots and they're not even actual followers. Because I've been in this situation where someone has brought a project into us that they want us to develop, and they'll go, oh, I have 3 million followers, but then you go to their page and you look through and you're like, all of those followers don't actually seem to be accounts of people. So what's going on here? I feel like there's a gaming of the system happening. And so I think we should really, if it's going to be that influential, we should understand what exactly it represents.
Yeah, well, there is the measure. So what you're talking about is if you have, and I have someone in my mind that I'll share with you next time we talk, but I know that she signed an exclusive deal with Facebook to play games, and people watch her play games and they pay her money to give her compliments. Okay.
That's insane.
And so, yeah. And so there is a measure. For example, Mark, I've never promoted.
Do you think I can get a Facebook page of people watching me read scripts for work? I mean, while I drink a cup of tea, I will happily gain some followers by doing that.
You have the charm.
I'll even wear a bikini.
Yeah. I don't know if you're the right demo, but potentially, but I think there is a way to discern whether, and I'll use this page as an example. There's about 14,000 followers. You can see by a percentage how many people like a photo, because some people can buy followers. I've never paid to get a follow. These are genuine fans, or some people who hate the show for some reason. But there's a way to discern whether they're real followers or not. But I know a lot of actresses who are they super talented actresses who have Oscars and Emmys, and they're very much pressured to tweet and do this to get eyeballs. So yes, from your perspective, when someone goes, Mark, you're at HBO, or not now, but when you were back then, it would be like, Mark, you're at ABC or wherever. I have 5 million followers. Oh, great. What do you do? Well, I play games and people watch me. Okay, what am I going to do with that? You know what I mean? It's like, but it exists. You can't deny the economics that, but it is.
But what you can question is whether or not the economics of somebody opening presents or playing games with people watching them translates into them having a television show or doing something that does require a specific set of skills. That's for me where the equation becomes somewhat murky, and where I don't understand how to translate that meaning in that digital space to something else somewhere else. That's what I don't understand.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to. I guess that's the thing. From your perspective, and from my perspective, where you go, okay, how do I develop a show with this person? Well, what do? They play games, and we watch them play games. Okay, that's what they should be doing if that's how they're making money. But don't come.
And if people are interested in watching them do that, go for it.
Yes,
but
exactly.
Don't tell me that person has meaning in some other in the political realm or somewhere else, in the television realm or in the literary realm. No, they don't necessarily.
Yeah. Right. And it's a very hard. So what I think is, for each situation, you have to look at the specificity of going, okay, let's say Mark Taylor started up this thing and all he talks about is how to think in terms of production. There's going to be a lot of people are going to go, oh, I kind of want to know that because that's what I'm interested in. You're going to get that specific following. You know what I mean? You're not going to get 5 million.
But don't ask me to break down the economics of how a business runs or whatever else that I know nothing about.
Right.
Keep me in my box, please.
Right. All right, Mark, now I remember why I always enjoyed talking to you, because we would always run out of time, even at Phil's house for movie night, which I will talk about one night for those people watching. Movie night at Phil's is a very special Sunday night event. All right. So Mark, I will see you, I'm sure, at Phil's, because eventually that has to open up again.
I don't know. I mean, he might decide he doesn't want people in his home again with the world we're living in right now, but we'll see what time allows for.
Yeah, I've seen him outside. Mark, always a delight. Always such a unique perspective. I'll see you. I hope to see you at Phil's. And thank you, everybody, for watching. And if I didn't answer any questions that were there for Mark, we'll answer the next time Mark visits. And let me just scroll through. Yes. So great. We'll talk about more of your favorite episodes and all of this stuff. So
Tom, it was good to see you. Great to talk to you. And thanks for having me on.
I appreciate you making the effort, especially on a Sunday. All right.
No worries.
Thanks, Mark. Always a
Take good
pleasure.
care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.